Nun Iunia Ivanovna Ilyina was born on the 26th of March 1875 in the county town of Ruza of Moscow province to a merchant's family, where there were also 2 more daughters and 1 son. Finishing 3 classes of a town school, Julia Ilyina was accepted as a novice to the female monastery of the Icon of Our Lady of the Sign on Kamenная Gora in the town of Yelets of Orlov province. Here the maiden was taught icon painting, later taking monastic vows with the name Iulia, and served as a senior choir singer and a letter writer of Abbess Raphaela. After Abbess Raphaela Bradihina passed away in 1914, Mother Iulia became an assistant and a letter writer of a new Mother Superior, Abbess Antonina Krivorotova. When the Bolsheviks came into force, the monastery was formally closed and in the documents was listed as former. Indeed, the community of nuns on Kamenная Gora continued their monastic life. In June 1918, the authorities tried to accuse nuns of the participation in Arga-March revolt, a grassroots actions of locals against the robbery of clergymen. In August the same year, from Moscow to the monastery a provision group was sent that took all the food from the tenement. However, nuns were not left by the mercy of God and the help of the charity providers, surviving during the years of starvation. In 1919, the nuns were unsuccessfully accused of supporting the people of Mamontov that occupied the town of Yelets for several days. The same year, the male monastery of Yelets was closed. A year later, Bolsheviks wanted to close the female monastery of the Sign, but workers refused to support them. Soon, Gupadezhda ordered nuns to make clothes and shoes for the Red Army. Nuns were provided with food and allowed to stay in the monastery. In August 1922, sewing art hand labor was created in the monastery. In 1926, the second union was opened. It was the atoll where they worked on laces, yarn, and so on. Nuns entered the atoll to earn a living and to have an opportunity to remain in their own cells. Working there, nuns continued to lead monastic way of life and take monastic vows. The nuns of the monastery showed their mass mercy in 1920s, taking care of orphans who were left homeless and hungry. As the children were taught spiritual values, the nuns were later accused of corrupting children. The supervisors of the monastery were Abbess Antonia, Rural Dean Sophia, Purser Gavrila, and senior choir singer Iunia Ilyina, supported by priests Vladimir Kavkazsky and Isidor Pavlov. Gradually, the monastery of the Icon of Our Lady of the Sign became the center of the religious life of those who remained loyal to the Patriarch. That could not remain unseen by the OGPU, and in 1924 Abbess Antonia and Archpriest Vladimir were arrested and spent some time behind bars. Renovationalism did not influence the monastery. While after the declaration of Metropolitan Sergiy Strogorodski was issued, the schism among the Orthodox clergy happened. In 1928, authorities began their campaign of liquidation of the monastery and expelling of the nuns who lived there. Ordinary workers demanded to close the monastery. In spring 1929, the executive committee of the district, basing on general meetings of voters and the demands of the unorganized population, recognized the closure of the Yelets monastery as necessary. Nuns and priest Vladimir Kavkazsky, who served at the Church of the Icon of Our Lady of the Sign in the monastery, tried to protect the communion from its liquidation. But already on the 4th of March 1929, Abbess Antonina Krivorotova, nuns Iunia Ilyina and Mavrikia Lutikova, as well as priests Vladimir Kavkazsky, were arrested and put behind bars in Yelets prison on the first category. In the indictment it was pointed out that these people, being the supervisors of the female monastery of the town of Yelets, being under cover of the atoll of sewers, agitated in the anti-Soviet way, using religious superstitions of the population. That resulted in the creation of a group in the monastery that prevented it from being liquidated, as well as in taking monastic vows and corrupting children. Mother Iulia was accused in the resistance of the authorities to liquidate the monastery, in organizing an illegal meeting to discuss issues connected with the protection of the monastery from its liquidation, as well as participation in illegal meetings at the place of the abbess of the monastery. The 54-year-old nun did not plead guilty in the indictment. On the 31st of May 1929, according to the 58th article, paragraphs 10 and 11 of the Criminal Code of Russia, by the special meeting of the OGPU committee, nun Iunia Ilyina was sentenced to 3 years of exile in Vatka region from the 4th of March 1929. Upon her release on the 10th of May 1932, by the special meeting of the OGPU committee, the nun was deprived of rights of living in 12 towns and Ural region, being made to live in one place permanently for 3 years. By 1935, 60-year-old nun Iunia Ilyina settled in the town of Samarkand of Uzbekistan. According to some sources, the nun took monastic vows with the name Iunia. By that time, the local church of St. George was closed, while according to the law, it was not allowed for a community to buy a room for divine services using their own money. On the 21st of March 1937, the faithful found the way out, buying a part of a small house of sun-dried brick in the name of nun Iunia Ilyina. Later, it became the basis of the modern church of St. George. Mother Iunia lived there for many years, serving as both a prayer poster and icon painter. Mother Iunia was rather short and of delicate constitution. While judging on her deeds, she devoted her life to serving to God, being a real devotee. In the conditions of anarchy and religious split, atheistic activity of the authorities and troubles caused by the renovated church, the Orthodox parish of the prayer house of St. George grew, while nun Iunia was bound to become its organizer and first prayer poster. On the 27th of February 1946, the community was allowed to build an altar. Thanks to donations of the faithful and parishioners, land and houses nearby were gradually bought. People remembered that during that period it was hard to buy simple building materials, all the more for a church. But prayer and hope for God were the basement of their life. Step by step, the church was widened. A prosperous bakery, a baptistery, a kitchen, a cell for nuns, a bell tower, and some service spaces were built. Mother Iunia painted icons, making painting brushes from her hair, while oil paints were very hard to buy. Icons and paintings painted by her have been saved well. Allay my woes, the agony in the Garden of Gethsemane, St. George, Michael the Archangel, Saint Sergius of Radonish and Saint Seraphim of Sarov, Saint Peter the Metropolitan of Moscow, Saint Gregory, the Resurrection of Christ, as well as paintings dedicated to evangelic stories. The house of prayer was threatened to be closed several times. One night, one of women saw her dream that the church building was served round with chains. The woman asked what that meant, and the answer was that the chains were the prayers of Mother Iunia to God. Thanks to them, the church was protected. In 1961, during the reign of Nikita Khrushchev, the successive wave of persecution of Christians began. Chief executive of the religious affairs of the town of Samarkand deprived priest Seraphim of registration reference. As a result, at the prayer house it was disallowed to serve. All people began to pray to God about saving the church. The struggle for saving services lasted more than 3 years, and finally they won. By that time, the mother could not walk. Years passed, and Mother Iunia became very ill. She started to lose her vision and grow deaf. In addition, she could hardly walk. The buildings were planted a way that allowed to get directly from the nun's room to the church. But until her last minute, the devotee continued to be interested in the services, church life with all its joys and problems. Even being completely blind, she recognized all the people who visited her. Mother Iunia passed away on the 11th of February 1967 nearly 92, being buried at the town graveyard of Samarkand.